Welcome back to Benjamin. Ladies and gentlemen, the war scenario in Gaza is showing signs of coming to an end after a shocking development from President Donald Trump. In a surprise statement, Mr. Trump revealed that he had presented a strategic map related to Gaza, and this map clearly shows the Israeli withdrawal route, with the limit being a yellow line, and is determined to be 6.5 kilometers south of Gaza, 2.5 kilometers from the center of the area, and 3.5 kilometers from the north. And according to Mr. Trump, he personally sent this map to Hamas, and surprisingly, Hamas immediately agreed to the plan. In return for Israel withdrawing its troops behind the yellow line, Hamas pledged to implement a complete ceasefire. This is an unprecedented agreement in the context of the tense conflict over the past months. It has gradually become apparent, and its author is Mr. Tran. The easing of tension is not only reflected in the commitments of the parties, but also confirmed by internal sources from the Israeli army. Fox News reported that the Israeli Defense Forces are preparing to disband their reserve units and shift all regular troops to a defensive position, and that means that offensive operations will officially stop. Israeli soldiers who have been holding guns all this time are waiting for the moment to return home, ending their days of living between fame and death with Hamas forces. And while the world is still surprised by the signs of a cooling down of the war in Gaza and this land that has been wounded too much, President Trump's silent moves are reshaping the entire Middle East chessboard. A tweet published by Mr. Trump referring to the protests in Israel with the message "It's now or never" is like an urgent call from the Jews. This is a direct rebuttal to the propaganda from the Israeli far right, which is accusing Mr. Trump of betraying the Jewish people. In response, the Israeli government immediately sent Mr. Ron Demer, one of Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest representatives, to Cairo. Demer is the man who has represented Tel Aviv in almost every major crisis situation. On the other hand, the U.S. side has thrown two key players into the negotiating table: negotiation expert Steve Dobikoff and advisor Jay Kushner. Mr. Wikoff is a seasoned veteran who has negotiated hundreds of real estate deals and is now the one responsible for dealing directly with representatives of Middle Eastern countries. But the key player was Mr. Kushner, the man in charge of the entire post-war plan. Without having to participate in the debate on each clause, Kushner was only concerned with one thing: that every agreement must operate smoothly after the gunfire stopped. And the most shocking thing was the information from a new article by a famous Israeli journalist and defense analyst, Amos Haran, who affirmed that a massacre had actually occurred at the Gaza border, Egypt, and that could be the last straw that threatens the entire deal on the negotiating table. Although both Hamas and Israel have agreed to President Trump's plan for Hamas to release all hostages and Israel to withdraw from Gaza, this fragile stability still depends entirely on the personal political will of one person, Mr. Trump. If he changes strategy, if Netanyahu backfires, or if third parties like Qatar or Saudi Arabia step in at the right moment, the entire historic deal could evaporate like sea foam in the Middle East political desert. And there is a strange and contradictory development that we must also mention to you. A development in the ceasefire negotiations in Gaza was revealed by journalist Amos Haran. That is, both Hamas and Israel are falling into a situation that no one dares to break. The two enemies who once could not stand each other are now sending signals of cooperation just to avoid being blamed for the collapse of the agreement proposed and led by Mr. Trump. Specifically, every time Mr. Trump makes a statement, we see that one side immediately responds in unison. When he said that Israel must stop the Gaza war, Hamas immediately responded that it was encouraging. And when he announced that Hamas must release all hostages, the Israeli Prime Minister also responded that it was very encouraging. It seems that every statement by Mr. Trump becomes a political reflex test, forcing both sides to show compliance so as not to be seen as the cause of a broken agreement. As for Mr. Trump, he has shown a cleverness in avoiding any public protests from Hamas and Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, he has not let the Western media focus on the deep disagreements and conflicts, but has proactively created a favorable atmosphere where each side has a reason to save face. Typically, when Hamas expressed concerns about a future Palestinian government that would be influenced by Hamas if it continued to control the league, Mr. Trump did not argue, did not criticize, but remained completely silent. Even when Hamas agreed to hand over the administration of Gaza to an independent Palestinian committee, but still reserved on the issue of disarmament, Mr. Trump did not react strongly. His strategy is very clear: to put the sensitive terms aside, to prioritize creating an image of peace and progress despite the political bombs smoldering behind the negotiating table. A diplomatic turning point is taking place right in the middle of the war in Gaza that shows no signs of cooling down. President Trump changed the whole situation after a remarkable call with Prime Minister Netanyahu. According to journalist Barak Ravit, before this call took place, Mr. Trump's team of advisors said that the Israeli side wanted to discuss further the terms of the ceasefire plan. However, after the call ended, Mr. Trump declared to the press that who said Netanyahu opposed? He did not agree. In fact, he had no choice but to agree. Mr. Trump also shared with journalist Barak Ravit that Netanyahu could not confront me. I spoke to him and he agreed, and this statement clearly shows the proactive diplomatic strategy from Washington in shaping the end of the war in Gaza. The agreement that the U.S. proposed includes the key provisions that Hamas must release all hostages, Israel withdraws in a planned manner, and that the disarmament process is implemented within a controlled international framework, and all aimed at establishing a sustainable security foundation and aiming at long-term stability in the Gaza Strip. However, while the plan is progressing diplomatically, the internal situation in Israel has appeared with mixed reactions. Several right-wing members of the cabinet have said they may quit the government if the ceasefire continues. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has warned that if Israel goes ahead with the ceasefire, he will not be able to stay in the government. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Beilan Smotrich has expressed his opposition to a plan to end hostilities without the approval of an additional security mechanism for the West Bank. And it is this context that makes the political situation in Israel extremely sensitive. At the same time, relatives of the hostages are actively campaigning for an end to the war, while a part of the masses support the continuation of the military campaign. Two opposing streams of opinion appear in parallel, and it creates a social environment full of pressure and requires strategic balance from the leaders. For his part, Mr. Netanyahu has emphasized that the ceasefire agreement is an opportunity to realize important goals such as rescuing hostages, eliminating Hamas's power, and maintaining a strategic role in Gaza. He also declared that if disarmament efforts cannot be achieved through the agreement, Israel will have to continue the necessary military measures. That is also a threat, ladies and gent. And now we see that the Gaza situation has entered a critical phase where all the combatants are being pushed to their limits, and the major powers are gradually reshaping their strategic roles. Now let's look at Hamas. First of all, it is important to be clear about their position. They did not start the conflict just to end it with the return of prisoners. Their deeper goal is to respond to the long-standing injustices that the Palestinian people have faced, as well as the repression by extremist groups and the lack of civil and political rights. However, both Hamas and Israel are facing harsh realities. The initial commitments have not yet materialized. Hamas claims to act for the future of the Palestinian people, but its living conditions and basic rights have not improved. Israel, although claiming to take back all the old people, has not yet achieved its military goals. And in that context, both sides are facing internal pressure. Hamas is under pressure from Arab countries in the region. Netanyahu is under serious political pressure from the far-right elements in the ruling coalition. And it is noteworthy that Mr. Trump's role is gradually becoming more prominent in diplomatic efforts related to the war. There are many sources showing that he is actively promoting the peace process, not only for the sake of regional stability, but also to reshape the role of the United States in Middle East issues. Some international sources mention that he could be one of the candidates for the Nobel Peace Prize, especially after the statement that he contributed to ending the Gaza conflict. Notably, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is under pressure from international organizations, has sent an official letter nominating Mr. Trump for this award. In that context, the U.S., as we have said, has sent figures close to Mr. Trump, such as Mr. Kinner and Mr. W. Kov, to Cairo to speed up the ceasefire negotiations. This move shows a strong determination to avoid letting political factors in the region derail the agreement. And the U.S. delegation plays the role of coordinating the logistical factors, oversee the structure of the negotiations, and ensure that agreements are reached at the highest speed. Egypt, as we know, is a country that Israel has tried to exclude in previous rounds of negotiations. Now it is back on the stage strongly, Cairo hosting the conference on October 6th to commemorate the victory in the October War is deeply symbolic and confirms its role as a credible and influential intermediary. On the Israeli side, the internal challenges continue to increase. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir has said he will not return to government if Netanyahu chooses the war option, as we have discussed. Finance Minister Smock has publicly criticized the peace deal and has also warned that he will withdraw from the governing coalition if the war ends, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition is facing the risk of collapse when opposing factions take to the streets to protest with opposite demands. One side demands the release of hostages and a ceasefire. The other wants to continue fighting. In general, it is as chaotic as chives. And the situation in the Middle East is very fragile, right? Every diplomatic move, every political shift can change the landscape. At this point, mediation, strategic stability, and decisive choices are shaping the future of the entire region. Netanyahu has said that the U.S. brokered deal will bring major security benefits to Israel, including dismantling Hamas, rescuing hostages, and retaining a presence in strategic areas of Gaza. He has insisted that if the weapons are not given up through negotiations, they will be seized militarily. However, the internal situation puts him in a difficult dilemma, especially with the growing pressure from far-right political groups. And we see that both Hamas and Israel are facing pressure from many sides. Hamas is facing demands for restraint from Arab countries, and internally, Israel is in turmoil, and the center of the current effort is back to the 100th pipe, and the negotiation rounds are being accelerated. Mr. Trump's intervention is strategic and clearly demonstrates Washington's goal of ending the war and moving to a period of political stability and economic stability in Gaza. Egypt is also becoming more vocal in the Israeli withdrawal. While Israel has proposed maintaining a presence to prevent smuggling across the border, it raises questions about its commitment to respecting sovereignty and international agreements. If Israeli and American forces are present, Egypt will have a stronger position at the negotiating table. Economically, if peace is established, Egypt will enter a new cycle of recovery. From the canal to tourism, from agriculture to industry, the indicators show positive prospects. And the grand opening of the Egyptian Museum is also a clear symbol of the post-war period, a period in which Egypt will take an active and leading role. And in the context of the risk of conflict between Israel and Egypt that has not been completely eliminated, a big surprise is that China is stepping up investment in the strategic economic zone called Ain Shakna. Not just one, but 24 factories are deployed simultaneously. It is not a random act, ladies and gentlemen, but the result of a tacit geo-economic agreement with European countries. And observers say that without a commitment to Europe importing products from these production facilities, China would have no reason to pour billions of dollars into a volatile region like the Eastern Mediterranean. And that proves that it is forming a network of interests with Egypt at the center. Economic growth brings with it the opportunity to modernize the military. With signs of a possible regional military clash, Egypt has raised its alert level, prepared for combat, and begun activating its suspended arms procurement plans. Deals such as Rafale fighter jets with conditions of partial domestic production Chinese submarines, or Swedish early warning aircraft are all given priority for evaluation. And this is a strategic move that not only helps the Army upgrade its combat capabilities, but also contributes to strengthening its deterrence capabilities. The fact that the Army is more proactive in its preparations also demonstrates the strategic forecasting ability of the national security. The early warning status has been activated, and it shows a military that is not only defensive but also ready to respond to any situation. In October, the country not only celebrated the resounding victory in the history of the October War, but also continuously sent out a strong message of national strength and spirit. Egyptian nationalism is growing stronger. Their Ministry of Defense also released a strategic document on the 1973 campaign and emphasized the courage and unwavering faith of the entire nation. It is clear that Egypt is also looking to step up. At the moment, Egypt is not only the host of negotiations within the framework of the Trump-led peace plan, but also plays a role in post-agreement coordination. And the fact that the Palestinian police force is trained in Egypt not only enhances professionalism, but also builds trust with the Gaza people and is an important condition for maintaining lasting peace. On the geopolitical chessboard, Egypt is also holding a rare initiative. With the tacit support of China, the tacit approval of Europe, close coordination with the U.S., and an increasingly clear military role, they are transforming from a hotspot into a center of stability, coordinating and reshaping the future of the Middle East. We will see in the coming time that they will be the power that controls the fate of many countries in the Middle East. And according to a veteran journalist named J.V. Barron, one of the leading writers on the Middle East and Israel, if the ceasefire agreement between the two sides is signed and successfully implemented, the next step is for Israel to restart the process of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. And that is the point, to be able to reshape this entire region. In the context that Saudi Arabia has signed a defense agreement with Pakistan and is strengthening strategic ties with countries with great military potential, the possibility of RAD reaching a defense agreement, even on nuclear, with the United States is becoming clearer than ever. In particular, we have seen that the U.S. has recently come forward to protect Qatar. Saudi Arabia is even a closer ally of the U.S. Potential terms of such an agreement could include sharing civilian nuclear energy technology and paving the way for the development of a dual-use nuclear program in the future. And if that happens, Saudi Arabia's normalization of relations with Israel would be the key to opening up a Middle East with many countries with nuclear potential, whether civilian, dual use, or military. And as a result, the balance of power here will change profoundly, and neighboring countries will have to adjust their entire strategies to respond. However, all of the above geostrategic plans, from Egypt's economic recovery, reestablishing the U.S.-Arab alliance, to the Israel normalization agreement, are all being threatened by a much larger variable: Iran. Recent U.S. military moves in the Middle East, including increasing naval presence, deploying defense systems, and sending more combat units to the region, have raised concerns among observers about a large-scale military confrontation with Iran. This is not impossible. We know that the U.S. attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, and that was the starting point for the revenge that Iran will surely have to pay. Another collision in the region between the U.S. and Iran is very likely to happen soon. Some analysts say that the speed of the ceasefire negotiations is not only to bring peace and stability to Gaza, but also to pave the way for larger U.S. operations. It is very likely that it will include a preemptive strike or a strong response in the coming time with Iran, because we know that Iran has not given up its nuclear program. They still have 400 kilograms of uranium hidden somewhere, and their nuclear plants and nuclear facilities are being restarted. Satellite images show that many of the nuclear facilities that were attacked are now undergoing renovations. And in the long run, That is the problem that is giving the U.S. a headache, not just the Hamas story. Hamas is just a very small force. Hamas is even a lackey of Iran. Iran is the problem that will give the U.S. a headache in the years to come. And the question now is, who is preparing for a bigger war? The U.S. is mobilizing its forces and continuing to strengthen its alliances with Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Israel is preparing to withdraw from Gaza. So all those arrows are pointing to Iran, and it is setting a very different scenario for the Middle East. When one war ends, another will begin. That is why people say the Middle East will never be free of war. But we still have to wait and see how the politicians will behave. At this point, today's program of Bin Kwansu will also be paused. Please share your personal views below.